Retirement is not what you think it is. Now let's break that down. So what comes to mind when you think of retirement? You know, that magical time where you're supposed to trade in your alarm clock for the margaritas on the beach? You know, it has been painted as this finish line. Work hard for 40 years, get into your 60s, collect your pension, and sail off into the sunset. I mean, just ask Google Images what they think retirement is. I mean, they portray it as this paradise of kicking back and golfing and traveling, basking in the glow of the decades of hard work that got you there. At least that's how it's sold to us, right? But here's the thing. Retirement isn't what it used to be. It's evolving. And if you're not paying attention, you could find yourself stuck in a plan that doesn't work for today's world. So let's dive into the ways that retirement is evolving and what you need to do to be prepared. To do that, I'm going to share with you some stories of real people and their honest stories and how their experience made them shift the way that they view retirement. See, I've been helping people plan their retirement for going on 20 years now, and I've seen a lot, but these real stories come up so often that I had to share them with you. When you're planning your retirement, you need to know how to evolve and prepare for the future of retirement. See, over the course of my career, I've worked with a lot of employees in aerospace and defense companies. And after working with people at a certain company, you begin to become specialized in a sense, and it led to a lot of referrals of friend groups. So there was one particular group of 5 senior engineers that I was working with, and we became very close, to the point that I was in their golf league, shooting over 100 at the time, and in their fantasy football leagues. I did win that championship once. These 5 engineers were brilliant at what they did, but they all had their gap when it came to their retirement plan that held them back. Let's start with Bob. See, he was the first person that I met at the company, and Bob's retirement planning hit a wall when he was 64. You see, his goal was to retire at 65, and retirement was just months away, or so he thought. For most of his life, Bob assumed his retirement would look just like his dad's. His father worked for a steel company for 35 years, retired with a pension, and spent his golden years fishing, traveling, and living comfortably off guaranteed income like we see in those Google images. See, Bob grew up thinking that this was his future too. But Bob's reality is a lot different. See, his company, they phased out their pension back in the early 2000s and replaced them with a 401k. See, Bob signed up for it, of course, but he didn't max it out. He always figured that there'd be time later on to catch up. He got raises and he helped his kids through college, took family vacations, but saving for retirement always took a back seat. He thought because he had been at the company for a brief period while they had a pension that he'd be okay. Now with his retirement coming up in a matter of months, Bob looked at his 401k balance and he had to really look in the mirror. And when he did, Bob asked himself, how am I supposed to retire on this? Scrolling through his numbers again, the $250,000 he saved isn't even close to what he needs to last 20 to 30 years. He did the math, and if he withdrew $50,000 a year to cover expenses, he'd be broke in a handful of years. And this wasn't part of his plan. And what Bob didn't know is that even with the small pension he had, it's barely going to cover his grocery bill. You see, pensions are disappearing, and the responsibility for funding retirement has shifted to individuals. A study by the National Institute on Retirement Security shows that nearly 40% of households have no retirement savings at all. Bob's story isn't unique, but it's preventable. Had he started saving earlier and prioritized his retirement along with life's other expenses, his future would look a lot brighter. Bob also could have helped himself by not waiting until the last minute to put together a financial plan. Had he done that earlier, he would have time to make the necessary changes to make his retirement goals possible. What do you think? Do you think that pensions should come back, or should it be up to the employees to save for their own retirement? I'd love to get your input. Drop your take into the comments below. See, after I met Bob and recalibrated his retirement priorities, he introduced me to his old boss, Susan. At the time, Susan was 68 and absolutely loving retirement. She spent her mornings hiking with her friends and her afternoons volunteering at the animal shelter and the weekends spoiling her grandkids. Life felt pretty perfect, but the problem was, late at night, Susan couldn't help but worry. She sat at her kitchen table with her calculator and her saving statements, running the numbers over and over and over again, and the math just didn't add up. You see, her plan had assumed that she'd live to around 85, but with her family's history of longevity, there was a good chance that she'd make it well into her 90s or even beyond. But her savings, on the other hand, that might not last as long. See, at first, she brushed this off, and she thought, you know what, I'm just going to figure this out later. But the anxiety kept coming back, and she always thought to herself, what if I ran out of money? Should she cut back on the little luxuries that she loved, like vacations with the grandkids, or even downsize her home? She started to feel like she was walking a tightrope without a safety net. And the thing was, Susan wasn't alone. Thanks to advancements in medicine, people are living longer than ever before. A 65-year-old woman today has a 1 in 3 chance of living to 90, according to Social Security stats. And while that's a gift, it also meant that money needs to stretch farther than before, sometimes 30 years or more. And if Susan had planned for a longer retirement from the start, she wouldn't have felt this level of stress. And with the right strategy like accounting for inflation, creating a sustainable withdrawal rate, and preparing for healthcare costs, she would have entered those years with a lot more confidence. See, living longer, that was a blessing, but it comes with its challenges. For Susan, our goal had become how to make her money last as long as she did without giving up the life that she loved. Going through this experience really woke Susan up. So she got me in touch with her good friend Mark. And Mark, he was 57, he was dead set on retiring early. He had it all planned out. He had the trips he wanted to take, organizations that he wanted to volunteer at, and plenty of time to focus on his hobby of furniture building. But when he finally sat down with his finances, that dream, it started to unravel. You see, his savings weren't where they needed to be, and he realized that retiring at 60 wasn't going to happen, at least not in the way that he had hoped. You see, at first, Mark felt defeated. See, the idea of working into his 60s seemed like the opposite of what he'd been working towards for decades. But as he thought about it more, he started to see a way forward. Maybe he didn't have to give up his dream entirely. His part-time consulting gigs or selling his furniture online could give Mark the extra income that he needed to bridge the gap, and even make him feel fulfilled along the way. But Mark wasn't alone. You see, studies have shown that 55% of workers plan to work in retirement, whether for financial reasons or personal fulfillment. For Mark, it was a mix of both. Working part-time wouldn't just help him financially, it would also give him structure and purpose, keeping him engaged during his retirement. In the end, Mark's version of retirement looked a lot different than what he had originally imagined, but it worked. So what's your thought on working in retirement? See, for some people, they look at this as the new way of living. And for others, they think that it's not retirement if you have to work. So do me a favor, drop your take in the comments below because I'd love to see what you think. For Mark, he found the balance between leisure and productivity, and he proved to himself that retirement doesn't have to mean stopping work, it can mean redefining it. What we had to do is we had to plan for the gap that he needed to make up, helping him understand what was realistic and gave him the confidence that he needed to actually enter retirement, knowing that he had to do some part-time work. Thankful for showing him the path to retirement, Mark introduced us to his closest friends, Jen and Paul. Jen and Paul had always imagined retirement as the time when they'd finally be able to do all the things they talked about for years. Travel, spend more time with family, and explore their hobbies. So Jen was 65 and she was already retired, and Paul, he was 62, planning to join her in a few years, just giving him a little bit more time to save up and finish some big projects at work. At first, things felt like they were on track. Jen enjoyed her newfound free time and threw herself into gardening and visiting the grandkids and taking up painting classes, whereas Paul, he loved being able to see Jen finally relax, and he was excited to be able to join her one day. They even took a celebratory trip to Italy to kick off this new chapter. But as time went on, they both started facing challenges that they hadn't fully planned for. At first, everything seemed perfect. Jen loved the freedom of retirement, and Paul enjoyed watching her finally relax. They took a celebratory trip to Italy and indulged in the kind of leisure that they had always dreamed of. But over time, cracks in their plan began to show. For Jen, the worry started quietly. She began noticing how quickly their savings was shrinking. Inflation was driving up everyday costs, and their spending was higher than they had planned, especially after some unexpected expenses like car repairs and medical bills. She started running the numbers and realized their savings might not last as long as they needed, especially with her family's history of longevity. If she lived into her 90s like her mother had, their money might run out far sooner than they expected. Where Paul, on the other hand, he was facing his own challenges. He retired a few years later as planned, but without the structure of work. He felt really bored, and he felt like he didn't have any sense of purpose. The daily routine and sense of accomplishment that he had during his career was gone. And retirement, which he thought would feel like freedom, felt strangely empty. He missed the camaraderie of his coworkers and the sense of purpose that he got from his job. What neither of them had expected was how much they'd need to adjust their view of retirement. For Jen, the financial strain made her realize that they needed to reassess their spending and their long-term plan. They downsized their home to free up some cash and adjusted their withdrawal rates. And they explored ways to make their money last longer. It wasn't easy to scale back after decades of hard work, but it gave her a peace of mind knowing that their plan was more sustainable. For Paul, the answer came in finding purpose beyond traditional work. He began volunteering at a nonprofit that supported small business owners, sharing the knowledge that he had and experience that he built over decades. The work gave him structure and a sense of accomplishment that he'd been missing, and it even made retirement feel meaningful in ways he hadn't expected. So retirement for Jen and Paul didn't look like they imagined initially, but they adapted. By facing their own challenges head on, they created this new version of retirement that worked for them. For Jen, it was about ensuring that her finances would last as long as they did. For Paul, it was about rediscovering purpose and structure in a way that felt fulfilling. Their story is a reminder that retirement isn't always about living the dream that you envisioned, it's about being flexible enough to create a new one. Retirement today is evolving, and sometimes that means adjusting your plans, rethinking your priorities, and finding new ways to thrive. Now, if you see yourself like Bob, Susan, Mark, Jen, or Paul, you're not alone. The old rules of retirement are out the window, and the new ones are being written today. Here's what you can do to prepare. You can start saving early. With pensions disappearing and the responsibility on you to save, max out your 401k and consider a Roth IRA to grow your money tax-free. You can plan for longevity. Assume that you're going to live into your 90s. Your money needs to last longer than ever, so plan for inflation, healthcare, and long-term care. Think beyond finances. Retirement isn't just about money. It's no longer just a financial conversation. It's about having a plan for your time and purpose. What's going to get you out of the bed in the morning? And lastly, stay flexible. Life's unpredictable. Your retirement plan should be able to adapt to changes, whether it's market dips or health issues or new goals. And lastly, get help. Retirement planning is complicated and you don't have to do it alone. Working with a financial advisor can help you make smart decisions and avoid costly mistakes. These stories aren't unique. They're happening everywhere because retirement isn't what it used to be. It's no longer a one-size-fits-all phase of life. It's dynamic, complicated, and it's personal. The good news, you have the power to shape your own future if you're ready to plan for it. If you don't know where to start, use the link in the description below and our team will help you get started. Retirement's evolving. The question is, are you ready to evolve with it?